Hello everybody, my name's Dee and welcome to my channel Dee-licious. Today I'm going to be sharing a recipe with you, one of my favourite recipes. It's actually one of the ones I think that I make most, which is scones. I like making scones, they're extremely easy to make, but my favourite thing about it is that if I have somebody round, they just drop in, a friend drops in or something like that, and I haven't got a bicky in the house, scones are extremely easy to just quickly whip up. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to share this particular recipe with you as well, was because I wanted to show that you don't have to have a great deal of experience to have a great deal of fun cooking. We're making sweet scones today. You can do lots and lots of different kinds of scones. My personal favourite is a cheese scone. But today we're making sweet scones because that's what my sister requested and she wants to eat them later. So my sister, by the way, is directing. She's on the other side of the camera, and probably later on you'll probably see her trying to sneak a little taste. So first things first, what you need to do is, I don't know if you watch Jamie Oliver, but it's an extremely good tip. Start with a sink full of warm soapy water. That way every time you finish with something, you can quickly put it in the sink and you don't have anything that's dried on and you're having trouble getting rid of. So turn the sink on. The other thing is to turn your oven on. That's the first thing you want to do. Now we're making scones. I like to cook mine between 180 to 200 centigrade, which I believe is something like 400 Fahrenheit. That's the temperature that I like to go with. I'm used to cooking on an Aga, which is why there's a big disparity between the two temperatures. And if I've been using the Aga, then the Aga is a little bit lower and the hot oven is a little bit cooler and is more likely to be around 180. Whereas if I haven't used it that day, it's going to be more up towards the 200 mark. Depending on which one you choose, your time that you keep them in the oven is going to be different. So I'm going to do this at 180 and I'm going to look at them after 10 minutes, but it's quite probable that they'll take about 15, but I do just like to check. Okay, so my oven's on, it's on 180 centigrade. Like I said, that'll be about 400 if you're working in Fahrenheit. Now the first things first, we're going to put our flour in. I'm using self-raising flour today. It's the quicker option. You can use plain. If you do use plain, you need to add 2 teaspoons of baking powder into the mix. Otherwise, you're going to have very, very flat scones, and nobody likes a flat scone. We like them nice and fluffy, don't we? So in goes that. That's, by the way, 450 grams. So that's roughly a pound of flour. I work in pounds and ounces because that's how I was taught as a child. My nana taught me mostly how to cook. My mum and my aunts were all taught by her. So we all work in ounces and pounds, which nowadays I think most of recipes that you get are in grams. And I do understand why that is. It is, I think, a more universal thing. So if you're working in pounds, that's just a pound of flour, but if you're in grams, it's 450. The next thing you're going to want to do is add butter. This is 75 grams of butter. No, I'm not going to do it in ounces because I didn't write that down. I like to just quickly chop this up whilst it's in the bowl of flour. Just a little like this. It makes it a little bit easier when you come to put your hands in there and try and spread it through the flour. I'm going to do this manually today. I'm using my hands because I want to show that you don't need a KitchenAid or posh mixer or anything like that. It's a very easy, very quick recipe, and once you've done it a few times, you'll be able to knock these out in about 15 minutes. So in books, they always tell you that you want to use the tips of your fingers in recipe books, don't they, like this? I don't tend to do that, I'm going to be honest. You don't always get enough spread, so I like to take a chunk between my hands and just do that. Now I'm sure there are people out there who are outraged and calling me a Philistine and all of those things, but this is what works for me, and you want to find out what works for you, because that's part of the fun of cooking. So you want to keep doing this until you have spread the butter evenly. They say breadcrumbs in recipe books. I feel like it's more like sand. I'm talking about the consistency, by the way, not how it tastes. Because this is scones and not pastry, it's not going to be quite so obvious. You just want to get rid of the lumps. Basically, is all you want to do. Blended that all out, and you have, you should be able to feel a slightly grainy consistency throughout the flour now, but it won't really be obvious looking at it, what you've done. At this point, I like to add my 50 grams of caster sugar, and I'm just going to see it through with my hands like that. Right, now, little tip, this is what I like to do. You're gonna have 200 milliliters of milk. Into this, I like to squeeze lemon. The lemon will react with the baking powder that's in the self-raising flour and will cause a fabulous rise. You will not be able to taste the lemon though. Once it's done its job and it's helped the rise, you won't be able to taste the lemon. So this is perfect for sweet or savoury. You're going to add 2 eggs, and I like to quickly put my eggs into a bowl first because I have been caught out in the past, and that's not fun. So in with the eggs. Now, in our house, half of us like fruit scones and half of us like plain scones. Personally, I do not like dried fruit. I like the taste but not the texture, which my sister tells me is seriously weird. My mum and my sister love fruit in their scones, so we have a little bit of a battle. War is happening in our house. Whilst you're waiting for your lemon, because what happens is your lemon in the milk, I know it sounds gross and I know it is going to look even worse because it will curdle it, and that's what you're waiting for. If you let it stand for a few minutes, it will curdle, and that's when you want to use it. Whilst you're waiting for that to happen, I have 50 grams of fruit. I've chosen raisins because that's what my mum and my sister like. You can use whatever you like. You can have dried blueberries, you can have dried cranberries, you can make it a little bit more fruitcakey by adding some citrus peel. It's actually quite nice. I have done that, and it smells fabulous if you use candied peel. I don't have any today, so I'm not putting it in today, and my sister hates marmalade, so... However, sometimes when you get your raisins, they can be a little bit too dried, a little bit too hard, and you don't want to come across one of them in your nice, soft, fluffy scone. So I was always taught to add tea to them to help them soften. Hot tea. I think it adds to their flavour as well as plumping them up a bit. So I'm just going to add a little bit of tea just to cover. By now, your milk will have curdled enough so that you can put that straight in. It's not the most appetizing sound. And then you're just going to want to get in there. My aunt always uses a fork for this point, but I'm messy and I just like to chuck my hands in. And you just want to stir it all together. My nana always used to tell me that a good scone is one that you haven't messed about with too much. So the least amount of stirring and kneading that you do, the better. You want to just combine it. You don't want to be over stirring it at all. Okay, so clean hands. I've just got some plain flour out of the cupboard to dust my side. You don't have to use self-raising for this part. It doesn't really matter. You're just stopping the dough from sticking to the side, and you just want to turn it over. Now, even by this point, you'll be able to hear that there's a lot of air in this recipe. and you don't want to get rid of that, so you don't want to be touching it too much. I personally, this is my preference, I do not use the posh little cutters to cut out my scones, because to me that's just messing about with it, and I don't really like to do that. So I'm going to cut this in half, because half of these, remember, have raisins in them. I'm just going to leave the other half like this and roughly shape it like so, and then I use a knife and I just cut my scones like so, because like I said before, they're best if you don't touch them, and I don't particularly mind not having completely uniform shapes, and that way I feel you get a better scone anyway. If you want to use the cookie cutters, that's fine. That becomes a lot more difficult if you're doing, if you have raisins in them, because they always try and catch on the raisins. I also like doing cheese and bacon scones, and it can be murder trying to cut through the bacon. So it's one of the reasons why I just like to use a knife. It's simpler. Right, so now we've got those cut up, I'm just going to put them on a tray. Now, I like to use the silicone because they're reusable, they're very user-friendly. I never burn anything, nothing ever sticks. So personally, that's what I would use. If you don't have a silicone mat, rather than grease-proof, I actually think it's better to just dust your tin with a thick layer of flour like you did to your side and put them on top of that. That's my favourite way of doing it. If I'm away and I don't have my stuff with me and I'm making scones, I just put them on top of flour. It's much, much easier, and I find they don't stick. So that's the best way of doing it for me. And so we're going to put those straight in. Some people will glaze these with either beaten egg or with some milk. I actually prefer to just leave them like that. Okay, so now you're left with your unused lot of dough. I like to strain these through. If you particularly want, you can use less milk, say 100 millilitres of milk, and then you can use the tea, which adds quite a nice flavour. You don't have to. I always forget, and I've always already used too much milk. So I'm just going to flatten this out a little bit and put these between the layers. It is perhaps not the most precise and even way of doing things, but it's the way that I like to do it, and you should do it the way that you like to do it. So I'm just going to pop this on top. That, to me, is the beauty of cooking. Yeah, there's lots of ways to do things, and lots of people have different ideas, but with most things you can wing it. Right, they're all ready, and like I said, you're going to want to check these after about 10 minutes. They're probably not going to be ready at 180. They're probably going to be about 15 minutes probably. You want them to be light, you don't want them to be too dark, but most importantly, when you turn them upside down, the base should be brown as well as the top, and that's how you know that you've got it cooked through. It will sound hollow if you tap it, it will sound slightly hollow. Okay, and here they are finished. These took about 12 to 15 minutes because I checked them after 10 and they weren't quite done. You want to just turn them over to see that the base is golden. Can you hear that? They've worked out beautifully. The traditional way of having them is with clotted cream. If you find that difficult to get in your country, I personally quite like them with whipped cream instead. It's a little bit lighter and you can actually get more on. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Hopefully there'll be more videos on the way.